tell me, first of all, your co-director, Heidi, she's from Detroit, I believe. Was that the impetus for the documentary?
Yes, actually. She grew up in the area, and both of her parents were born and raised in the city. She grew up right outside of the city, and it's a story that's very, near and dear to her heart. And she had been talking about it for years, and I ended up going a few times for other projects that we were working on, and I certainly agreed with her that there was a very important and, rich story that needed to be told in this place. So with that in mind, we started filming and fundraising.
Well, it's interesting because the documentary form in general, because you could have an inspiration for a project, but you don't know the final form that it will take.
That's one of the beauties of it, actually.
I love that about it. So, I mean, what surprised you about, what did you find your film to be in the process of making it that surprised you?
Oh, there were a lot of surprises. I mean, initially we had a different name for the film, before we even started shooting, which, is exactly the opposite advice that we would give someone else to do. And we called the film Detroit Hustles Harder, and it was a Phoenix from the Ashes story, and that's just what we were certain that we were going to find. And after filming for a few months, we looked at each other and we said, that's not the story that we're discovering, and that's not the story that, long-time residents of Detroit are interested in. That's not the conversation they want to have. So that was our first surprise. And then that it ended up being sort of a story about, manufacturing and the bottoming out of the middle class, that it became sort of these big issues, these big sort of policy issues that people talk about a lot and have been discussed for decades, was kind of in the forefront, that it was a three-dimensional human form was taking for these ideas. And that wasn't something that we had anticipated happening either.
Well, it's incredibly powerful because Detroit was once a booming kind of metropolis with the birth of Motown and the auto industry and all of that. And what you saw and what is in the film, there are sections of Detroit that look like something out of an apocalyptic movie.
Well, it's lost more than half its population, and it was an enormous city to begin with. So it does end up feeling kind of, pretty abandoned when you go there now. And people have just left their homes. They just basically took the clothes on their back and left. Unemployment's been such a problem there, so people are desperate and they just have left. But what we decided that was something that was important to us was, yes, half the population has left, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the 715,000 people that have stayed. That's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are there, that are actually, engaging with these spaces and, live in this environment. And why did they decide to stay? If they could leave, why are they here? That was really what started driving our story, is exploring, the life that remains.
And what did you find? Did you find a certain resilience and determination to try to make things better?
Yeah, it was. There was things that there is a survivor mentality that the people left there have, that is absolutely inspirational. But also there's some humor, you might call it gallows humor, but their situation isn't lost on them. And they so believe in their city. They so believe in not just in the idea behind the city, which is that, it being the birthplace of the middle class, this idea that, if you work hard enough and you do what you're supposed to do, that you can earn your way into a decent living and a decent lifestyle in this country. And I think that all of them very much have, the American dream is not faded at all for the people living there. That was another surprise. You'd think that these people would be the most jaded and the most sort of bitter. But they're not. They're not. They're total survivors. And, they're looking forward to the next chapter for their city.
I would imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine that a lot of people were anxious to share their stories with you guys. Was that the case? And if so, what was your determining factor on who you actually followed?
Well, we did find a lot of people that would talk to us and that we filmed, and we had tons of characters that we were following initially, and then, we sort of synthesized while we're editing, and it, and basically ended up with the people in the film. But it's not like Detroiters are like the most, cuddly, soft and cuddly people in the world. We did have to certainly explain what our intentions were, and there's been a lot of media that's happened in Detroit over the years, and every election cycle it gets, cycled through again. And I think they're a little, they feel a little bruised. So, they didn't exactly embrace us with open arms. Not that they were discouraging, but it's a very tough crowd.
Well, I would imagine that they're used to a lot of people coming there that you mentioned the politicians that are entirely self-serving.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Both candidates right now are taking credit for saving Detroit. And, from what I can see on the ground, the people that are living there, their lives have not improved at all. In fact, it's getting worse by the day as far as city services and just basic quality of life living there. And the big question is, who's going to be talking about it? Who's going to be, going to Michigan and discussing the loss of manufacturing come December 2012? That's that's the question.
Exactly, and it's just a heartbreaking moment in your film too, when the community is broke, and so they're shutting down power services and bus routes, and they can't get to work without the bus routes, and they're kind of pleading.
Right. Absolutely. That is actually, in my opinion, one of the most powerful scenes in the film, and I think that it flies in the face of everybody, especially us Americans. I think that, this concept of the American dream has really been exported, and a lot of people worldwide sort of accept the definition for it. And a scene where a woman, is pleading for them not to shut off the public buses because it's her only mode of transportation and she won't be able to get to work, very much flies in the face of the American dream, where, as I said, if you work hard enough and you do what you're supposed to do, you earn your place in America with a decent quality of life. And if she's doing everything she's supposed to be doing and it's not working, then the American dream is broken. And I think that's something that's very, it's very real in that kind of scenario. It's very simple, it's not complicated at all. It's black and white. So,
and really, watching it kind of formulated in my mind that poverty is the ultimate cruelty. It's like the ultimate act of violence in a way.
It is. I totally agree with you, especially in a country as wealthy and affluent as ours. It's even more sort of crass for it to exist in the way that it does. And and I would say, in addition, the way that the public school system is another thing that's kind of sort of as crass as it can be, especially when you look at a city like Detroit, where the system is, I think it's probably the worst in the country. And that is having an impact on the future of the city. It's, it needs to invest in some human capital, because if you don't have a literate population, then you're sunk before you started.
But that's certainly one of the keys to recovery for the community. But I'm sure that the auto bailout helped. That it would have been a lot worse without it. But what are some other keys that you see that have to take place for the area to recover?
Well, education is they're basic but incredibly complicated. The answers are very simple. It needs an education system that works. It needs to be safe. Without those two things, no one will ever live there. Forget about the jobs. Even if there are jobs there, if you can't educate your kids and you don't feel safe going to get a carton of milk, who wants to live there? You can't get people to live there. So, and in addition, you could have hundreds and thousands of the kind of manufacturing jobs that exist now, which are high-tech jobs. And if you don't have a population that can do the work, again, the jobs are irrelevant. So, those are sort of systemic issues that need to be addressed nationwide, but just are in incredibly stark relief in a place like Detroit. There's some policy stuff that should be experimented with. I would say that Detroit's a good candidate for lowering corporate taxes and trying to get businesses there, and anything they can do to attract any kind of industry. They should do, maybe not forever, but for a period of time, and just get some blood and fresh blood coming in there, encouraging people to be entrepreneurs, which again I think all of this stuff could be applied to the United States. I think that's the thing about Detroit. It's really just hopefully it's not, but it could be interpreted as a mirror to the rest of the country, but sort of 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to ask you about, because late in the film, one of the people in your film, I forget who it is, but she says that, Detroit should serve as a wake-up call to the rest of the country, and I'm wondering from you what you think the U.S. could learn from Detroit.
What the rest of the country could learn from Detroit?
Yes.
There's so many lessons there, Well, that's why I was saying, I was sort of getting at that with the, encouraging a culture of entrepreneurship, because one huge lesson we can learn is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't, have these one industry towns have been the hardest struck, when their industry dries up or changes or moves offshore or, just becomes something else. They have no backup plan. So, the more diversified an economy is, the healthier it can be. And you see these other small cities that were slammed with, in the same way that Detroit was, when basically globalization hit critical mass and all the jobs left. Cities like Pittsburgh or Cincinnati had other things that they could turn to, like university and medical research, and had somewhat of a diverse economy that they could develop. Detroit didn't have that, so that's a cautionary tale for sure.
Yeah.
And working on racial divides, I think it's something that really ripped the city apart, Detroit. And again, it happens in cities all over the United States, but I've never seen it like it is there. It's pretty startling. There's a line in the sand, and the races do not cross it. And I think that is a recipe for disaster in our urban centers.
I'm curious from you as a documentarian, We a couple of weeks ago, we welcomed on the team behind the documentary I'm Carolyn Parker, which is Jonathan Demme's documentary about New Orleans, and he feels such a kind of responsibility to that community. He feels that he's going to return to there years from now to see how it progresses. When you do your work, I mean, it can't be easy to kind of sever yourself after a project's over. I mean, I would imagine that it stays with you and you remain invested.
Absolutely. No, I mean, well, first of all, you've had sort of a very strange, being a filmmaker and your filmmaker-subject relationship is very strange and unique. You're not friends with them, but you're intimate with them. You need them, then they need you. I mean, it's very, loaded. So you share something. You have a very intense experience with each other. And I've stayed in touch with all of the main characters of all of our films over the years. You're bonded with each other, and you are invested, in what happens to this place, to this person, to this school. No matter if you're incredibly different, you have absolutely nothing else in common with them. It's like a relative that maybe you have nothing in common with, but you're related to them, so that's it. And I mean, I definitely, my heart is invested into this place and to the citizens, and not, if nothing else, as a fellow American, I hope that that's at least that takeaway happens with with our audience, is that this is a great American city that it's basically on its knees and it's struggling, and we should all think about it, and not just every 4 years when there's an election cycle. This is huge. This is important, and what happens to this place matters to all of us.